Paralympic mascots. I've already talked at length about Olympic mascots and Olympic emblems, and while I'll eventually get to Winter Olympic emblems and Paralympic emblems, for now, I would like to talk about Paralympic mascots, because mascots are fun and frequently weird. Very, very weird. Laid out here, I have the 22 Paralympic mascots that have existed as of 2024. We're just gonna, as usual, go through them in order, which means we are starting with Noggy and Joggy. All right, so our first mascots are from the 1980 Paralympics in the Netherlands, and as you can see, they are a pair of squirrels sporting clothing that bears the emblem of the 1980 Paralympics on it. Like a lot of Olympic mascots, they were chosen in a design contest, but that's pretty much all the information I can find on them, which leaves me with a lot more questions than answers. Why are they squirrels? No idea. What's the significance of their names? Again, no idea. Why were contestants required to submit handmade 3D models of their mascot designs when the final design was going to be 2D and printed on flat surfaces? Not a clue. This is the main problem with the Paralympics being a less publicized event than the Olympics, is that a lot of information gets lost, particularly in regards to very niche details like the mascots. But we're forced to rate them based on what info we have, and to me, Noggy and Joggy kinda just exist. They're not offensive, but I can't really find any reason or significance behind them or their designs. They're just a D tier mascot for me. Dan D. Lion. He's a lion. He's wearing a tracksuit. Gotta be honest, he looks a little more like Mark Knopfler than a world-class athlete to me. The only significant info I could find on Dan D. Lion was that his name was chosen by students at a school for individuals with severe physical impairments, which, to be fair, Dan D. Lion is an absolute heater of a name. But like I said, that's pretty much all the significant info I could find. I can't find any info on why he's a lion, why he's named that way, what significance those might hold, which is to say nothing of the design itself. Of all the Paralympic mascots, Dan D. Lion is the one that feels most like an afterthought. He's not in full color, doesn't even have a full finalized design, it seems. He's just a red sketch on a white background. I think his name and overall kind of goofiness have a bit of a charm to them. And so I do actually kind of like Dan D. Lion. He's kind of an enigma to me. I would love to learn more about him and see what a full final design would look like, but he is absolute C tier at best, and even then I might be a little generous. The Dori. So the name means teddy bears in Korean, and they're supposed to be Asiatic black bears. I think you might have missed on the color there a little bit. As you can see, they have a ribbon or rope tied around their legs bearing the colors of the Olympic rings, which is supposed to symbolize the newfound cooperation between the Olympic and Paralympic organizing committees, as this was the first time the games were taking place in the same city at roughly the same time, which is kind of cool. Nothing about them really screams Paralympics to me, but they're cool, they're cute, I like them. They're well designed. I like that art style that they've used, even though it has aged just a little bit. I don't think there's anything particularly mind-blowing or revolutionary about the mascots for these games, but they're pleasant enough, and they are the first, I would say, genuinely good mascots for the Paralympic Games. So we are putting the Bears in the B tier. Alpi. It's a mountain. It's literally a mountain. I do think Alpi is probably one of the goofiest ideas for a mascot on this list. However, he's also probably the first mascot that successfully represents both the region in which the games are taking place as well as the Paralympics themselves. Alpi is literally a mountain named after the Alps, which is where the games were taking place, but he is also on a monoski, which alpine skiing is one of the more popular events at the Winter Paralympics. It's also only one of 6 events, so the competition is not exactly steep, unlike Alpi. I think Alpi is a good mascot. He's goofy and weird, but he is fun. I like Alpi. Petra. So based on what I've found, Petra seems to be the first Paralympic mascot to receive considerable attention, primarily due to the popularity and success of the 1992 Olympic mascot Kobe. As you can probably imagine, her design was pretty shocking when it was first unveiled, but I still think it's pretty solid. She's done in the same sort of pseudo-cubist art style that Kobe is drawn in, and as an armless girl, her design is very direct, but it's very effective at conveying the Paralympic message. Alpi may have ridden a monoski, but Petra would actually compete in the Paralympics. She confronts who is actually competing, who the Paralympics are for. I think Petra is a great mascot. I think she opened a lot of doors for Paralympic mascot design, and the fact that she was pretty heavily publicized thanks to the success of Kobe is really, really cool. I think that's really neat that she was given a lot of attention as a Paralympic mascot, probably the first to be publicized as such. Sandra. So for the 1994 Lillehammer Winter Olympics, we got Sandra, an amputated troll, and the fact that he's a troll when the other Olympic mascots were human children, it's a little weird. I believe the idea is that the children represent Norse history, whereas Sandra represents Norse mythology, which is kind of cool, and I do like the mascot design. I think this art style is kind of neat, and while Hakon and Kristen had a slightly off-putting design, especially the way they kind of stare into your soul there, Sandra's little beady eyes, they're more cute. They're more playful, I think. I think Sandra is good. I think he's pretty likable, although I also think it's kind of weird that we've had 2 consecutive winter mascots that are on skis. But regardless, I think Sandra is a pretty solid mascot. I'd say he's generally likable, so I'm gonna drop him in the B tier. Blaze. So, interesting thing about Blaze, there seems to be exactly 1 image of him on the internet, and it's really, really small, so we're just gonna have to make do. I think Blaze's design is kind of weird and has not aged well. There's some very vibrant, high saturation colors used, particularly the blue and teal, which just looks kind of weird, especially with the heavy use of gradients throughout the rest of Blaze's design. It feels aggressively 90s. Also, Triumph of the Human Spirit is pretty cool text and very thematically appropriate, although it's kind of weird that it's included in his design like this. Symbolically, however, I think Blaze is a phenomenal mascot, kind of representing this desire to achieve success despite various limitations, which I'm sure is a theme that rings true for a lot of Paralympic athletes. Also, there's the fact that the Phoenix is very symbolic of the city of Atlanta itself, specifically the fact that it is on the city seal. So while design-wise, I don't think Blaze is a particularly great mascot, symbolically, he might be the best mascot on this list, and so I will put him in A tier. I think Blaze is great. Parabit. So, as you can see, Parabit is a rabbit. The name derives from Paralympic rabbit. All seems a little on the nose so far. Now, out of context, the design comes across as a little weird and dated, given the colors used and general art style and overall lack of image fidelity, but it is in fact based on the emblem used for these games, and when you stack the 2 side by side, you may be able to notice a couple similarities. Now, why the emblem was designed in this way, I'm not really sure, but as a mascot, I think Parabit is good. I think Parabit's kind of cute. It's got its own charm, even if it is pretty aggressively 90s, and given the colors used and overall shape of it, it does have that symbolism for the Paralympics going. Also, this is the 3rd consecutive Winter Paralympic mascot on skis. Of the 3 Winter Paralympic mascots thus far, I do think Alpi's sheer goofiness makes him my favorite, but Parabit is well designed and is pretty likable. So, again, B tier. Lizzy. More popular than these 3, and even more popular than Fatso, we have Lizzy, a frill-necked lizard and the mascot for the 2000 Summer Paralympics. I think Lizzy is brilliant. She is an objectively great mascot, not just for the Paralympics, but flat out.
As a frill-necked lizard, she is perfectly symbolic of Australia and Australian wildlife, never mind the fact that her frill itself is shaped like Australia and Tasmania, which is a really, really cool detail. The orange of her body represents the Australian desert, the white on her frill kind of represents or symbolizes the Australian sun, and the yellow and green rounding out the color palette are the two colors you most strongly associate with Australia. I think Lizzy's design is simply kind of genius. It's no wonder that she was far more popular than any other mascot, official or unofficial, for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Simply put, Lizzy is an S-tier mascot. Just, that's all there is to it. Otto. Otto is a sea otter, which is an animal that is, I guess, native to North America, though I'm not entirely sure if it's native to Salt Lake City specifically. Sea otters were revered by Native Americans as uniquely powerful and versatile creatures, which in that way, Otto is sort of representative of athletes in the Paralympics. Other than that, I can't seem to find any significant symbolism for Otto and why he's an otter. The name doesn't mean anything as far as I can tell. I'm pretty indifferent to Otto. I don't think he's good or great or bad. He's just kind of there. So I'm gonna slide him into C tier right next to Dandelion. Proteus. So for the 2004 Olympics, we had Athena and Favos as mascots, and they're kind of weird given their strange, awkward, cartoony art style and their weird proportions, but they are based on these ancient Greek terracotta dolls, and so in that context, their design is fine enough. But the further removed from that context, the more we try to draw things in that art style, the weirder things get, hence Proteus the seahorse. I'm not entirely sure why Proteus is a seahorse, but there does seem to be at least a little symbolism in his design. For example, his primary colors being red, green, and blue, referencing the primary colors of the Paralympic emblem, which is also the name deriving from the adjective protean, meaning adaptable or flexible, and once again kind of implying the versatility of the athletes competing in these games. I mean, I guess that symbolism is fine, but again, I don't really understand much of Proteus's design because in a vacuum, his design doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, his art style is based on the one used for the Olympic mascots, which itself is a cartoonification of the design of ancient Greek dolls upon which the Olympic mascots were based, so there's multiple degrees of separation between Proteus and the context explaining why he's designed in the way he is. Also, which one of these is his mouth? I am once again pretty indifferent on Proteus. I think it's an okay mascot, but once again, he is going in C tier. Aster. Isn't any real explanation for his name, isn't much of an explanation for his design. He's just a really, really optimistic snowflake. I guess Aster is supposed to represent the uniqueness of every athlete competing in the Paralympics, but like, can't that also be applied to the Olympics to some extent? Also, something about that just feels oddly patronizing to me. Like, if that's really the only symbolism behind your mascot design, it kind of makes your design come across as kind of shallow. I don't really like Aster for the same reasons that I don't really like the other mascots used for the 2006 Olympics, and that these games were taking place in Turin, Italy, and there isn't really anything that ties these mascots to Italy. They could very easily be rebranded for any other Winter Olympic Games, and they would fit in just as well there as they would in their original location. So for that reason, I am dropping Aster in the D tier. He's just not a very good mascot in my opinion. Funu Lele. I'm going to assume that's how you pronounce that name. I probably butchered it, but whatever. So right off the bat, I'd say this is a fairly pleasant design. I kind of like the cartoon brushstroke almost art style, and the primary colors being pink, blue, green, apparently deriving from traditional Chinese New Year toys and drawings, colors, and whatnot. Apparently it's supposed to represent the coexistence between mankind and nature, which is cool. You know, that's kind of neat. Although I do find it really weird that the design and symbolism don't really have anything in common or any link to the the other 2008 mascots, the Fua. I guess the brushstroke art styles are vaguely similar, but Funulele's design is very, very vibrant as opposed to the Fua, and like I said, doesn't really seem to share any symbolism with them, which is really odd considering the Fua seemed to try to represent or symbolize literally everything under the sun. I think Funulele is fine. I feel like I should have a whole lot more to say about it, but it's good. I like Funulele. Pleasant design. That's really about it. Sumi. So for Vancouver 2010, we saw the return of the Paralympic mascot, Sumi, being once again pretty heavily integrated with the Olympic mascots, Kwachi and Miga, as well as the quote-unquote sidekick Muk Muk. I think Sumi's design is pretty neat, even if it is kind of just a mishmash of various other animals, with Thunderbird wings, black bear legs, and orca hat that's kind of drawn in the art style of the Haida people, which is an indigenous group native to what is now British Columbia. I think despite that, it feels like a very cohesive and natural design, and with it alongside the other mascots kind of representing Canadian wildlife and native mythologies and legends and that sort of thing, it really is kind of like a cool and complete group of mascots. I think Sumi is very neat, very pleasant, very solid mascot. I'm putting Sumi very comfortably in A tier. Mandeville. Like the Olympic mascot Wenlock, I think Mandeville's design is frankly kind of terrifying. They've tried to sneak little bits of symbolism in there, like how the yellow light on its forehead is supposed to evoke London taxis, and the 3 spikes represent the Paralympic Agitos, which are the 3 Nike swoosh looking things that make up the modern Paralympic logo. And once again, I don't really care about all the symbolism that's been tacked onto these designs to try and explain the way they are. I think this is horrifying. However, like Wenlock, I believe Mandeville might have one of the best names for any mascot, named specifically after the Stoke Mandeville Hospital, whose Stoke Mandeville Games were the precursor to the Paralympics. So that is really, really cool and a really nice little tribute. Like Wenlock, I think that name alone will save it from F tier, because it's a pretty good name. It's a pretty absurdly good name, but design is just terrifying. Like, please keep this away from me. Ray of Light and Snowflake. This is going to be a no from me, dog. There is something about this design that terrifies me to my core. There is something uncanny about these two, and it frightens me. I'm pretty sure it's the eyes. I don't know how to describe a bad pair of eyes, but I know it when I see it, and this is it. This is it. They are planning something, and I am not sticking around to find out what. The official explanation for these two is that they are aliens. Literal aliens. I guess that explains why they feel so uncanny. Never mind that I couldn't find any symbolism for these two, why they exist, why they're designed in the way they are. Just the design alone is... It scares me. I don't even have like necessarily a good reason for hating it, but it is so kind of off-putting to me. It is so unsettling that I'm putting it in F tier. I'm sorry. Tom. Now that we're past what might be the 3 worst Paralympic mascots, let us now move quickly on to Tom, who is undeniably one of the best. I talked about it a bit during the Olympic mascot tier list, but I think Vinicius and Tom are the gold standard for Olympic mascot design. They are the power couple. They're designed in the same art style with similar but swapped color palettes. One represents Brazilian flora while the other represents Brazilian fauna. They're named after beloved Brazilian musicians, and I think there's just something innately lovable about their design. They work well separately, but together they're phenomenal. They are a complete package. For that reason, I think I find it kind of difficult to rate one without rating the other. So I'm just gonna rate Tom the same thing I rated Vinicius. He's getting a very, very strong A tier. Bundabi. Once again, the Paralympics return to Korea, and once again, our mascot is an Asiatic black bear, and at least they got the colors right this time. I mentioned this in the previous video, but I think Bundabi has a better design than most Olympic mascots. Love his art style. It's super clean, it's super modern, and it's approachable to all ages. And his hat has a little, classic red, blue, green for the Paralympic emblem. Love to see that inclusion in there. The name derives from the words for half moon, kind of referencing the pattern on his chest, as well as the celebration of competition. Doesn't seem to have quite as much symbolism baked into him as Suharang. However, I still think he is just immensely lovable. I think he's a phenomenal design. I kind of want to put him in S tier, and I think I will, just because I do believe his design is just that good, and I think he works a little bit better by himself as a mascot than anybody else in A tier. I think he's just phenomenal. Love Bundabi. Samighty. For the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, we had yet another phenomenal tandem of mascots, Mirai Toa and Samighty, with the latter being our mascot for the Paralympic Games. There's quite a bit that I like about Samighty's design, such as the Ichimatsu Moyo pattern making another return, which again was used for the emblem for the games. Her name is almost a double entendre, with it sounding like the English phrase "so mighty," which is how one might describe the athletes participating in the games, but it in fact derives from a type of cherry blossom, and we can see various cherry blossoms adorning the sides of her head. And of course, her being a superhero robot, kind of drawing parallels to Japanese animations, comics, and entertainment. I think Samighty is a very good mascot. Again, I think she works a little better when she is given the context of being partnered with Mirai Toa. However, I still think she is a phenomenal design, and so we are going to go with yet another strong A tier. Shu Run Run. So unlike the Olympic mascot Bing Duen Duen, who was a panda encased in a suit of ice and I thought was a little weird and maybe a bit on the nose, I think Shu Run Run is a phenomenal mascot. As a snow-covered Chinese lantern, you get references not only to the fact that this is a Winter Olympics, but a reference to the time of year that the games are taking place around the Chinese New Year's. Plus, it's a pretty overt reference to China and Chinese tradition and holidays. In my opinion, that is really fun and playful and a very clever integration of symbolism into the mascot's design. And plus, just look at Shui Run Run. The way the snow kind of makes a face, where you can scrunch it up and look kind of embarrassed and cute, and I think it's an adorable mascot. I think Shui Run Run is a supremely underrated mascot, needs more recognition. It is going to be our third S tier mascot. I love it too much. The Frige. Last year I called the Frige a cute but odd choice for an Olympic mascot. However, now that the Paris Olympics have come and gone, I gotta be honest, they've kind of grown on me. I still think it was kind of a weird and oddly specific choice for a mascot, but I still think they're also really, really cute, and they seem to be at least relatively popular with the crowd at the Paris Olympics. One of them does have a prosthetic leg, so I guess that is our Paralympic mascot, but they seem to be so well integrated for both Olympic games that I honestly don't really see much point in making a distinction between the Olympic and Paralympic Frige. I think the Frige are cute, I think they're fun, I think I'm bumping them up to A tier. And last but not least, Milo. Unveiled earlier this year, we have Tina and Milo, a pair of ermines who will be our mascots for the 2026 Cortina Milan Winter Olympics. While ermines aren't the first animal that comes to mind when I'm thinking of Italy, I think it's because I didn't really know what an ermine was, and as mascots, they're definitely more appropriate than an anthropomorphized bowl of pasta, so, checks out. Their names obviously derive from the Italian cities of Cortina and Milan, and they're supposed to represent innocence and diversity and purity. As you can see, they are also accompanied by a group of anthropomorphic snowdrop flowers called the Flow, who are based on the runner-up designs in the mascot contest. And likewise, they symbolize hopefulness and resilience, which, I mean, altogether, we've got some of the ideals for the Olympic Games and Paralympics. So, honestly, I think pretty solid group of mascots we got here. I like them better than anything in B, so I am going to put them in A. I think it's on the slightly lower end of the A tier spectrum, but I think these are some pretty solid mascot designs. I'm excited to see how they shake out and what the general public reception is going to be. So there we go. There's the Paralympic mascot tier list. Honestly, a little more positively biased than I thought it was going to be. I'm kind of surprised to see that because I didn't really know of any Paralympic mascots off the top of my head aside from the very, very recent ones.
But that's really all I have for you guys today. So, as always, thank you for watching, and feel free to let me know down in the comments what you would change. Speaking of comments, Wenlock looks like a Pokemon that doesn't evolve. That is an aggressively accurate take, and I am upset I did not think of it. Call me biased, but Vancouver in B tier? They did a fantastic job representing native cultures in Vancouver and were extremely marketable. Yeah, in hindsight, I'm not entirely sure why I put the Vancouver mascots in B tier because I'm pretty sure I only had very positive things to say about them. I think I only bumped them down to B because I don't generally like groups of mascots, but even this group is really, really good. So you know what? I will retroactively bump them up to A tier. Props to Vancouver. I remember seeing a Saturday morning cartoon pilot featuring Izzy. It was akin to having a stroke. Yeah, I too would probably have an aneurysm if I saw that thing moving around. Say what you want about Olympic mascots, Smokey from the 1932 Los Angeles Olympics is superior. I didn't learn about Smokey until after I made the tier list, but he is an actual dog that was born in the Olympic Village and was made the official mascot, making him the first official mascot, and yes, he is absolutely the single greatest mascot of all time. Triple S tier for Smokey. You just can't even subtly hide your bias against China, can you? No, you can't just be angry about some snowshoe hare, a coyote, and a black bear all because of their excessive symbolism. Of course I can. I have over 500 million power in Rise of Kingdoms. This is true. Meat Boy and the Chromosome Girl. I assume you're talking about the lack thereof. This didn't age well. Lafrige has become the most loved mascot in history of Olympics, beating every other precious mascot. Look, I think I'm someone who likes Lafrige a little more than the average person, but to say they're the most beloved mascot in the history of the Olympic Games, there's some pretty stiff competition there. I think first you might need to go around convincing the other people in the comments section because there are some spicy takes in here. Sarajevo! Nailed it. Did you really put Vuko higher than Misha? Yes. Make the Paralympic mascots next. Well, it wasn't exactly next, but I did get around to it, so hopefully you're out there watching this. Can't agree enough that Korea makes some kick-ass tigers. Love from Korea. Yeah, apparently you guys like making some bears too, which, I mean, bears and tigers are cool. Maybe consider expanding your palette of animals a little bit? Still very cool designs, but if Korea hosts a third Olympics, I think you're gonna have to really outdo yourselves if you want to go for a third tiger and bear mascot duo. Also, I'm shocked anyone from Korea is actually watching my dinky videos, so thank you very much. You missed Shus, the first Winter Olympics mascot. He's extremely creepy. Yeah, Shus was undiscovered to me prior to that video, and I wish he'd stayed undiscovered after. Powder, Copper, and Coal are S tier for me. They look like the main characters of a cartoon, and they're very cute. Yeah, this was probably the other most hated take of mine, me putting Powder, Copper, and Coal in not top tier. I still wish so much symbolism hadn't been seemingly needlessly tacked onto their design, but I guess they're not that bad. I still don't really care for groups of mascots, but they can be done pretty well, I guess. So maybe I should revise my opinion for some of the mascot groups we reviewed. But that does not mean I'm changing my opinion on the Fua. I don't like the Fua, and no, that does not make me racist.